Hello everyone, my name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 4, Episode 3.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, we're going to jump right back in where we left off in the book Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe. This is the second book in his 3-book trilogy. And we left off on chapter 5 titled New Associations. So let's see what Dr. Monroe says in chapter 5. In hundreds of hours of explorer communication to date, almost 1/3 consist of those instances where the explorer's permission, their friendly entities take over their physical bodies and speak using the explorer's physical vocal cords. The other 2/3 are contacts made by the explorer, who then converses with a non-physical third party and reports the conversation. In both cases, the monitor in the control room, the living physical domain, becomes a part of such discussions. What we call the explorer material is a combination of fascinating, baffling, awe-inspiring, thought-provoking, sometimes boring data that is certainly much in conflict with many of the belief systems that we have within our culture and civilization. Well, folks, Dr. Monroe here is talking about here where we have, with the permission of the Gateway Explorers, the Mind Warriors, the Warrior Monks, the Citizen Samurais, the Guerrilla Gurus that we are, he says, with our permission, some of the people that have been working in the Gateway program at the Monroe Institute have allowed friendly entities to take over their physical bodies and speak using their physical vocal cords. I mean, that sounds a lot like possession to me, folks, and that is very interesting. Of course, that's something that's never occurred in any of my experiences with the Gateway Experience tapes. And it's interesting because he says that really goes against our current culture and civilization. And again, that's why people maybe that are deeply religious are going to look at these type of things as evil and scary, because here we're reading about people being possessed by entities. Again, I don't know how true this is. Again, it's never happened to me, but we have a long ways to go, folks, so I guess we'll find out. So through the data that they gathered, with all the experimentation that was going on, there were certain elements that repeat themselves. And what we found here is, number one, whatever they may be, such non-physical third parties have the ability to radiate a warmth of friendliness that evokes complete trust, even with their lives, on the part of the explorers. So that is wonderful to hear, that any entities that are interacting with the Mind Warriors, the Gateway Explorers out there, they are radiating warmth and friendliness. Now, again, the only time that I've ever, experienced any type of entities, I talked about this before, I felt like my 4 grandparents were there with me. It wasn't in their physical form. It was more spirit form. I barely saw them. It was more just the awareness that they were there with me. And again, overwhelming sense of love, warmth, happiness, nothing scary. So again, that's some of these familiar things that we're all going to run into as we do these tapes. Number 2, such beings are first of all totally solicitous as to the well-being of the explorer and spend much time in attempting to advance the best mental and physical state of the human being with whom they are associated. So it seems like whoever these entities are, they have our best interest at heart, and that's good to know. Number 3, a being usually appears to the explorer in the form of a hooded figure whose face is hidden in shadow and apparently invisible to the explorer. Now, that's kind of scary, folks. Hooded figures coming to you while you're having these out-of-body experiences. Again, I've never, through the tapes, ran into any hooded figures. But let's read on here. It says, once the explorer becomes completely familiar with the feel of the entity, the hooded robe is discarded and the explorer can perceive nothing, but still senses the radiation that is the entity. I think that's a great way to explain, like I said, when I felt like I was visited by my grandparents. 4 of these spirits, 2 on each side of me. I could feel them there. And I could perceive their radiation. Again, it was just this faint kind of glow where they were, where their spirits were. I didn't see them like I see them in the physical world, but it was just my perception, perceiving that they were there. Number 4 here, it says, in speaking to the explorer, that being is limited in vocabulary to that in the memory bank of the said explorer. Therefore, it often shows hesitation in searching for the correct word to express what needs to be described. And often there is no such word in the memory of the individual. So what we're talking about here is it's often very difficult to describe what we experience in the tapes, because these experiences are occurring outside of our normal, our 5 senses, the way that we normally describe life, right? We describe it through our physical senses. And so we have to, there's often difficulty explaining what we've experienced, but it also, I thought this was interesting, the limited vocabulary in the memory bank of the explorer. And that to me also, it extends beyond just the vocabulary and how we communicate when we are having these out-of-body experiences, how we communicate with these entities or the universe, whatever it may be. It also plays into that idea of imagination, that again, this is all happening in our imagination. And if our imagination is limited, we are going to have limited experiences. Number 5, the last one here, says, during visits by certain of these beings, especially when they use the physical body to speak through, there is a change in body voltage and other biomonitoring data in the explorer. Okay. So basically, again, the volunteers for the Monroe Institute, when they were doing these deep studies, they were listening to the tapes connected to all sorts of sensors, monitoring their brain waves, monitoring their temperature and their heartbeat. And basically, they are saying that these volunteers would allow these entities to take over their physical body, and these entities would speak through the vocal cords of the volunteer. And when this was occurring, they would notice that their body voltage would change. They were able to, recognize that on a scientific monitoring tool. So that's pretty strange. Again, we haven't come that far. We're not quite doing those type of experiments here in the Mind War, but interesting data, right? So the rest of this chapter is, again, a lot of basically the dream journals of the people, the explorers, the volunteers in the Gateway program. I'm going to leave those dream journals for you to read on your own. Again, these books, there's a description, or in the description of this video, you're going to find links to archive.org, where you can find all of these books for free, or of course you can buy them from Amazon. That's where I got mine. So I'm not going to go through too much of what they actually said in their dream journals, but this little section here I thought was interesting. One of the volunteers says here, just as we can daydream and invent characters and situations, we are characters in a situation that was invented or dreamt, quite consciously dreamt by a more advanced sort of consciousness. The part that we have to play in this daydream is one of education, one of learning and bettering ourselves, striving to become more. Now, I'm not clear why this kind of overconsciousness or oversoul is having this daydream, but I have the feeling that it is for its own education. It learns as we learn. So I thought that was very interesting because we hear that all throughout different religions, that this Godhead has created all of us, materialized us in order for God to experience life, right? They are experiencing life through us. And I think that's pretty interesting. I don't necessarily take the exact kind of spiritual beliefs that we find in religion where it is, an old man sitting in the clouds. But I think of this oneness, this one consciousness that we're talking about. I think of it more as a cloud out there in the universe that was there in the blackness before the universe was created. And it created the universe, and it did so, again, just like we're talking about here, in order to experience life. And as the cloud is out there, it begins to rain. And each drop, each individual droplet that comes down from that cloud becomes an individual, a person, an animal, a plant, any type of living being here on the earth or throughout the universe, right? And when it does, that individual drop again becomes us. We become separate from the one conscious. But then as we go throughout our life, we do just as the explorer here is talking about. We learn, we experience life, we create these beautiful and amazing stories that make up all of our lives. And then when we pass away and our physical body disintegrates into nothing, the water that makes up 70% of our bodies, I've heard 50 to 70% of our body is just water. Well, that water, it begins to dissipate back out, back up to the cloud. And this is the spirit body I'm talking about now. So that one droplet now, it goes back up, it evaporates back up into the cloud, that one consciousness out there in the universe, and we bring with it the stories of our life. And now, when we reach the cloud, this oneness consciousness, right? We're no longer the individual. Our story is thrown into the stories of all of humanity, of all of time, of all of existence. And it's that story that the cloud was actually looking for. Again, you think of this consciousness floating around in darkness for, eternity. That's boring. It wanted to experience something. It did it through us, and we return those stories. And once we pass and we go back into that conscious oneness, we now get to experience everyone's story. We get to live through the life of everyone else. And that's where that golden rule comes in, right? Treat others as you want to be treated, because one day you're going to be living through the life of the people that you interact with. You're going to see and feel and experience everything they did. So be good to each other, folks. So let's go through again a lot of the dream journal stuff here. I'll leave that up to you to read. So I thought this was kind of interesting. Now, this is one of the technicians who is running the experiment. They're outside of the room. They have the volunteer in the room, all hooked up to the monitors, and they are communicating with them through microphones and headphones. And supposedly this volunteer, again, had some type of entity talking through them. So the technician asks, ask your friend how we got here in the first place, how we got on the planet Earth and in space time. And so the volunteer, or this entity that has taken over the volunteer, again, I don't know how real this is. I'm not quite sure. We'll figure it out as we go through future seasons here. He talks about how in the beginning there was literally just particles of energy and how they would run into each other. And when they did, they would kind of realize, oh, something else is here. Now they would make these connections and begin to communicate with each other, just tiny little particles. And how over time they would form larger and larger balls of energy, and that started to become matter. And they themselves, again, just particles of energy, would experiment. They would try one thing, and if it was successful, they would continue doing it. If they tried something else and it failed, they would cut that path of learning off and not, go down that path anymore. Sounds very strange. It's very esoteric, but it's also scientific. Think about looking at cells under the microscope. We've all seen it in our textbooks, online, through videos and stuff like that, where you're watching these cells split and becoming two, and how they communicate and form together. And it's so strange and alien. We look at these tiny little things and say, they can't be alive. They can't have consciousness or purpose. But somehow they do. They have a program. They are working their little tails off to become something more and communicate and grow. I thought that was very interesting. Again, a lot of these stories, it's like someone's dream journal, so you got to take it as it is, but it's a fascinating read. There is one volunteer here who really gives a sermon. They talk almost as if they were writing in the Bible or something like that, like a King James version. It's very interesting. I think I'm going to save that for future seasons of Mind War when we do some sermons. So that was an interesting chapter. There was some good knowledge there. That was chapter 5, titled New Associations. Okay, let's dive into chapter 6. It's titled SEGUE, S-E-G-U-E. I'm not really sure what it is. Dr. Monroe tries to define it here. And basically, I believe it's how music, a song, will transition from one part of the song to the next. The chorus will lead into the next part of the song, right? And how important it is that the transition between the parts of music are, they flow properly, because if not, then the song would be jarring and it just wouldn't work. Kind of a strange analogy, but basically, I think he's talking about as we, talk about these subjects, as we move from one kind of chapter to the next, right? We have to make sure we have a smooth transition. So here we're going to talk about, here is a mix of premises and conclusions we have reached by mid-1984. That's right, folks. 1984. This book, he is taking information and talking about the experiments that they conducted 40 years ago. And these are, again, some of the premises and conclusions that they had reached by 1984. Number 1, all humans move into the out-of-body state during sleep. All of us, as we sleep, have an out-of-body experience. The problem is, the majority of us are not conscious while it happens. And it's so difficult because those of us who are doing this exploring, those of us who have had these experiences, are so desperately trying to share with others the reality of what we can all experience. All of us are doing it. But so many people, when we try to share this information with us, they say, no way, that doesn't happen. It's not real. But they do it every single night when they fall asleep. So it can be very frustrating. In one of the tapes that I listened to the other day, when I went back and listened to tape 1-5 again, just for the enjoyment and the beautiful feeling of it. And that's the tape where you fall asleep at the end. And it was very interesting because as the end of the tape was coming, I found myself still being very conscious. I was aware that I was in focus 10, but I could feel my perception, the curious part of my life, like the part of my being that gets excited. I felt it disappearing, floating out into the dream state. It was like as if part of me was saying, see you later, bud, but I'm going to go have some fun now. And I was like, well, wait a minute, wait. I want to go with you. And then my conscious slowly fell into the unconscious as I fell asleep. So it was very interesting having this kind of duality of, is our consciousness that we live with and experience our physical world, is it different than the spirit, right? That spirit that allows us to have fun and feel emotions and be excited and curious about things. That was a very interesting feeling. Number 2, a form of dynamic energy yet to be identified and measured by mainstream human civilization is present in all carbon-based organic life. Our spirit, whatever it is that makes up our spirit in humans, it's in everything, all carbon-based life forms, plants, animals, etc., right? And that's a beautiful thing to know. It's good to know that. It's going to help you better understand how you want to treat other things on this planet, right? Other living things. Number 3, the dominant waking conscious that man considers of paramount importance in the scheme of his existence is but a part, and perhaps the lesser part, of the various forms thereof used by and or available to him. The addition of other parts can be made systematically, albeit carefully, to the dominant without danger or destruction. The physical conscious I was just talking about, the waking consciousness that experiences our 5 physical senses, that makes us think that all the things that we strive for in our life are so important, that get us to focus on food and entertainment and relaxation and all of those type of things, and also cause stress and all of that. Those characteristics of our physical waking consciousness are not the most important part of our being, number 1, and that we can add things to it systematically and carefully without danger or destruction. And that's what we do by doing the Gateway Experience tapes, by being mind warriors, citizen samurais, guerrilla gurus, and warrior monks. We are actively trying to add different states of being to our current physical waking consciousness, because we know that we are more than our physical body and that we are more than physical matter. Number 4, human consciousness is but a manifestation of a system generated under a vibrational pattern, multi-layered and of many interacting and reasoning frequencies. It responds to and acts upon like patterns from external sources. So, one of the things, this vibrational pattern, multiple layers of frequencies. Again, we are made up of physical matter, right? Our physical body is. These atoms, these tiny molecules, these particles, and even atoms are made up of neutrons, electrons, all of this fun stuff, right? The protons, all of those things. Those, from what I understand, science tells us, those things are held together and interact with frequencies, vibrations, right? I think string theory is a version of this frequency in a string loop or whatever, right? And that's I think what Dr. Monroe is talking about here is that all of us, all of these tiny little things inside of us, they are connected and communicate and work through these vibrational frequencies. And number 5, human and other patterns of consciousness are inherently non-physical. No belief system, illusion, action, or thought incurred during a sojourn in time-space can alter this basic process. In short, like it or not, you're going to continue to do and be after you can no longer hang in there physically. There is no rest, not only for the wicked, but for everyone else as well. We are more than our physical bodies. We are going to experience some type of existence after our physical bodies return to dust. And there's really no escaping that, folks. But again, that's a beautiful truth that we can carry on throughout the rest of our life knowing. And when these type of truths are experienced in your life, it helps you change the way you view life. Some of those things that we talked about earlier, those concerns and worries and all this, they just fade away. They're not nearly as important as they used to be. Number 6, in the awe-inspiring cloud of cosmology that has emanated from the explorers and their contacts, almost unnoticed is an underlying mosaic of action that becomes an astounding potential when examined separately. So, the most important part, what he's talking about here, very poetically, very eloquently, he said we have to share our stories. We have to share our stories with others, not just as the individual drop, but we share our stories because that then becomes our bigger consciousness, the human story, right? That's what we're writing here today. So, again, this chapter goes into more of the volunteers' stories, those kind of dream journals. I'll leave some of that for you, but here's a few. This is from one explorer, and he says this. This is important. I have just experienced being sucked in a long tube and pushed the other way. I'm like in a cocoon. I've been practicing going in and out of this tunnel, back up or back down and up there. They thought it was kind of important to practice that. So I've been zooming up and zooming down. My body looks like, through a telescope, the long way. And you kind of zoom in and then you zoom out. This is exactly the description of what we did in tape 3-2, remote viewing. We took our energy toolbar, we turned it into a tube, we connect one end of the tube to our consciousness, we extend the other out to the friend that we want to remote view, and we allow our perception to go through the tube, through the tunnel. And what the volunteer here is saying is that they were practicing that. They had created this tube and they were just practicing going back and forth, allowing their perception to go to the other end, see what was there, and then return. Again, practice makes perfect. That's what these tapes are about too. It's not just about listening to them one time. We've talked about some of these tapes. Revisit them over and over and over again. Of course, there are tapes that we don't want to do that. Tape 1-4, where we deal with our fear. We don't necessarily want to listen to that tape over and over again, right? And future tapes will be the same. But there are some, tape 1-5, where we explore sleep. 1-6, where we are allowed to just free flow and focus 10. Those are tapes you can listen to over and over again. So let's see here. So I thought this was kind of interesting too here. It says, they're going through about 20 different bullet points here, again, of kind of different things that they have taken from everyone's report. They've read through everyone's dream journals. I'm not going to read through all the bullet points. I'll let you go through those, but I thought this one was important here. It says, the entire history of humankind and Earth is available to them in the most minute detail if needed. Where and how such information is stored and retrieved is part of such technology, a seeming unimportant part. Implied also in such information storage is data of the entire physical universe, if there were any reason to require such detail. This is what we just talked about. That cloud of consciousness, that oneness, that all encompassing knowledge that is out there in the universe. Some call it God, some, whatever it is to you, that cloud out there, that has all the information in the universe. It has all of our experiences, our life story. When we go back after we pass and are allowed to review our life over and over and over again for eternity, folks, that's where it's stored. The entire history of humankind in this technology is what Dr. Monroe calls it. So that's going to be interesting to kind of figure out, what is that? Can we tap into whatever this technology is that contains this knowledge of the universe from the beginning all the way to the present? I don't know if it knows the future yet. I don't necessarily believe that we can know the future. That's a tough one, but we'll find out, right? But I thought that was interesting. Let's see here. It goes on to say, it does not take much speculation to recognize the potential revolutionary changes in our science and culture, if but a part of such technology were actively introduced and applied in the months and years to come. Any serious consideration of all of the above hinges on one question: how valid is the entire project? To this end, responsible parties who wish to replicate such experiments are welcome. That's us, folks. That's us here in the Mind War. We are the responsible parties who are carrying on these experiments. Now, are we responsible? I like to think of us as mavericks. Again, we are not, associated with hemi-sync.org. We're not associated with, the Monroe Institute or anything. We are those rebels. We are those, again, mind warriors, guerrilla gurus, citizen samurais, and warrior monks out there taking this information into our own hands, applying it to our own lives the way that we want to, not necessarily following all sorts of rules and dogma. Again, I've told you before, this isn't dogma. These books aren't dogma. Dr. Monroe is not a saint. He is not a religious figure that we're going to, worship. None of that. I'm not here to make you believe Dr. Monroe's experiences. I'm not here to convince you to believe my experiences. I am here asking you to have your own experiences. That's the most important part, right? But I thought that was cute, the responsible party. So I guess that's us, right? Let's see. To carry on, because this is going to play into future episodes here, it says, I cannot stress this too much. All other intelligent species use what we now call nonverbal communication. Remember that. NVC, nonverbal communication. That's going to come up in future episodes. It is something far more than what we label body language, telepathy, remote viewing, and the often mystical or religious connotations so commonly applied to a tiny part of the nonverbal communication. It is direct, instant experience and or immediate knowing transmitted from one intelligent energy system and received by another. So this communication, that we do with these entities, when we run into them, when we start to work with them through our use of the Gateway Experience tapes, the deeper that we dive into them, again, I haven't had a lot of experiences. When I was there and had the, spirits of my grandparents there with me, I didn't communicate with them. There was no type of asking them questions, none of that stuff. It was simply feeling them, feeling their presence, feeling their love, their warmth, the acceptance, the happiness that came with it. That was a form of nonverbal communication that I had with them. But as we go on and as we get deeper into the tapes, we'll see if we run into other entities where we have this nonverbal communication, okay? And so that was the last part of that chapter. I thought that was interesting. I wanted to make sure that we discuss nonverbal communication because, again, it starts to come into play in future episodes. That was chapter 6, MZOO. And then chapter 5 was titled New Associations from the book Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe, the second book in his 3-book trilogy. And folks, we are going to do a deep dive into Wave 3 Freedom, Tape 3 Vectors in Focus 12, when we return from a word from our sponsor.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War.
Welcome back, folks. Before we dive into today's tape, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the scheduling for this season. So in season 3, when we first started exploring the Gateway Experience program, I was listening to one tape every week. And each week I was doing my best to add the enhancements of psilocybin to that. Now, a few tapes I didn't, but the majority of them I did. And I found that this was quite a rigorous schedule. And season 3 was pretty exhausting for me. Your friend Victor here, I'm an old man. And, it really took a lot out of me. So this season I wanted to break it up a little bit. And so what I've done is, in my spiritual practice, I do my ceremonies, whatever we're going to call it in future seasons, right? I do that on the new moon and the full moon each month. So twice a month I do that. And I take psilocybin as part of those rituals. And so I thought, since I'm already listening to the Gateway Experience tapes as part of my spiritual practices, along with the enhancements of psilocybin, instead of trying to get those extra, once a week doing it, I decided I'm just going to listen to 2 tapes on those nights because the psilocybin experience, it is amazing, but it is, again, pretty draining for an old guy like myself. If I was in my 20s, I'd be doing it every day, right? But now I decided I'm already going to be in that state of mind. I might as well listen to 2 tapes. And so that's what I'm doing now, is that on the full moon or the new moon, that's when I'm doing my preparation for these episodes. And I'm listening to 2 tapes at a time and taking notes. So I just wanted to be clear with that. I thought transparency was important. So let's see. Let's dive into, again, Wave 3 Freedom, Tape 3, Vectors in Focus 12. Okay, so Dr. Monroe starts us out here. He says, move now into your preparatory process. You all know that by now. He says, now with your resonant energy balloon. So we are in our resonant energy balloon. He says, we're going to let it float upward now into Focus 12, the state of expanded awareness. So this is where, again, where we were in tape 3-1, okay, liftoff. We were in Focus 10 at that point in our resonant energy balloon floating upwards. Now we're going to go one level higher with that. we're going to be in our resonant energy balloon, floating upwards, but we're going to then go again from focus 10 into focus 12, and now have not only are we floating in our resonant energy balloon, but now we are expanding our awareness and our perception. Remember, that's focus 12, that expanded state of awareness outside of our physical body. We are thinking and perceiving outside of our own mind. It's a beautiful feeling. I can't wait for you to feel it. So here it says, feel and perceive from the safety of your resonant energy balloon as you float in focus 12, the state of expanded awareness where you will perceive in all directions and in all ways. Again, our perception is expanded in all directions and all ways. He says, now I will guide you to help you perceive and remember. Upward. He says, I want you to perceive upward where the number 12 is. Number 12, perceive and remember. So now, our perception is going to move upwards to the number 12. We're thinking of a clock, right? We are allowing our perception to move upwards to the number 12 on the clock face. When we do this tape, for me, it was very interesting because it's an amazing tape for the physical feel. Again, that feeling of falling backwards, the butterflies in your stomach, the feeling of rotating left and right, forward and backwards. You get a real sense of movement while your body is laying there. It's truly amazing. It's such an interesting phenomenon. So with our perception at 12, we're looking up, and now he's going to say, move to your right. Move and observe the number 3. Okay, so now our perception is moved to the right. And when he says this, again, the sounds that are going on in the tape, again, that kind of spaceship sound, or you'll have the sound of a high-pitched noise. And the high-pitched noise, because of the headphones, it may start over here, but then it stretches this way, and you hear it in the headphones, and you hear it in your mind, and it pulls your perception to the right, okay? Then he says, now perceive downward, where the number 6 is. Perceive through the number 6, right? So now our perception is pulled by sound. We hear that high-pitched noise kind of moving from the right and pulling us downward. And each time we are going to remember and perceive at each number, and we'll get into that in a moment. Now turn your perception to the left, where the number 9 is. Perceive through the number 9. That's very important. Not only is it important for what we're doing here in the Gateway Experience tapes, this idea of perceiving through things is going to be fundamental in our work on the spiritual. Again, the Gateway Experience tape are scientific ways to learn magic. We are learning white magic right now. This is very important, okay? And so we are going to be perceiving through the number 9. You want to look through it. And what it does is that pulls that perception almost infinitely in that direction. And then he says, now move your perception back to the number 12 where you began, okay? Now, he says, now move your perception forward to the number 3. So this time, your perception is upward at 12, but now instead of the number 3 being over here, it's going to be in front of you. And so now your perception is moved forward. And now it's almost, again, like you're looking out your physical eyes. That perception is back to where we normally experience it in life, but it's infinitely going out in front of us. And he says, now move your perception forward and down from 3 down below to 6. So now this really gets interesting, where that physical feeling of falling comes in. Now your perception was in front of you. Now it's going downward. Now you feel like you're falling forward. It's an amazing feeling. It's one thing to be on your back, laying on your back, and feel like you're falling backwards, or feeling like the bed is kind of falling out from underneath you, or you're floating upwards. It's a whole nother, phenomenon when you feel like you're floating and moving forwards. It was very interesting. It says, now move your perception up and behind you to the number 9 directly behind you. So now not only are you perceiving downwards, now you're going to perceive back upwards. You're almost doing a somersault. You're perceiving back to the number 9, right? Because the number 9 is now behind you. And then you work your way back up to number 12, where we started. Now, this is what's interesting. Not only is this tape crucial in teaching us the tools that we need and the skills that we need in order to traverse this plane of existence that we're in. It's how we physically, and I know that's the wrong word to use. Again, this is the hard part, trying to explain this. This is how we are physically moving through this environment with our perception. We are allowing our perception to move through this new environment that we're in. Most of the work that we've done so far is just kind of in front of us or moving up and down, things like that. But now we're actually going to be moving around in this environment. And this is a great tape to do that and to learn those skills. But here is another part that's very interesting. When he tells us to have our perception on the number 12, 3, 6, or 9, he tells us to perceive, observe, and remember. And what's interesting is each number, you will begin to perceive something. It's almost like a dream. And for me, I was, each number, interacting with a friend that I haven't seen in a long time. It was almost like, the best way that I can describe it, okay, so it's in the blackness. It's not like a normal dream. When you're in a dream, the whole world is around you, right? Whatever dream scenario you're in, whatever building you're running through, or whatever nature scene that you're in, you see all of it. This wasn't that way. It was out of the darkness, this person appeared. And it reminded me almost exactly of when Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Friedman did the virtual reality conversation in the Meta universe that Meta or Facebook is developing through their virtual reality goggles, right? And it was very interesting. Everyone, when we saw it, we're like, what is this? This is crazy. Because basically when you're communicating with this other person through these virtual reality goggles, they just appear out of the darkness. It's just them surrounded by the darkness. There's no room around them or anything. They're just floating there in the darkness. And that's exactly what this felt like. And it was interesting. And what really gave me hope is that this interaction with my friend was not only memories that we had shared our time together in the past, it was almost as if these were also memories that were going to occur in the future. So it gave me hope that I will see them again one day, and I'm excited for that. I want that to be real. So again, this tape here, it's not about just learning to move and find direction throughout this new type of existence, this new spiritual plane that we're in. It's also about perceiving things. And you're going to remember those. You know, he tells you you're going to observe and remember. So now he's walked us all the way around the clock as if we were just looking at it straight on. He's walked us through the clock as if we're looking forward and doing almost a somersault. And now we've ended up back at 12. Our perception is back here, but we've been wound up like a spring, right? And we have to go back the way we started. Now he says, I will guide you and move you back the way you came, around the numbers of the clock. Okay? So now he talks us backwards. And this part is very interesting. Again, those feelings of falling, those butterflies in your stomach are going to come very fast because he does this very quickly. He says, now your perception is at 12. I want you to perceive backwards to the number 9. So now you're falling backwards to the number 9, because remember the last time we saw 9, it was behind us. And then we're falling back to 6. So now we're flipping around and we're coming back up to 3. And the perception is back at 12. And now we fall this way. We fall to 9 and we spin around to 6, back up to 3 and back up to 12. Our perception is back at 12. That focus 12. So we've retraced our steps, right? We've unwound that spring, released that tension almost that we were building as we moved around the clock. Beautiful feeling. When I listened to this tape last night, I used the enhancements of the Malabar strain, one of my favorite strains of psilocybin. It was very intense. A lot of, again, the visuals were very clear when I was speaking with my friend, but everything else was very dark. There wasn't a lot of light flashing or anything like that, but it was just very calm. It felt amazing, this movement, right? He says, now let your resonant energy balloon with you inside, let it float downward, okay? So now we are, again, still in focus 12 in our resonant energy balloon. Now we're going to start floating back down to where our physical body is, right? More and more down, more and more. Now you are safe in your resonant energy balloon back in focus 10. So we are not only having our resonant energy balloon floating down, but at the same time, we are coming down from focus 12, that expanded state of awareness. We are returning to focus 10, which is where we are conscious. Our mind is wide awake, but our body is still asleep. And you know you are in your physical body in focus 10. So we've returned to focus 10 now. He says, relax and observe. It's always important. After we have these amazing experiences, we have to sit back. Dr. Monroe allows us time to relax and observe what just happened. Allow it to sink into your memory. Review it as much as you can. And it can be difficult because it's still so exciting. It's like being on a roller coaster and you're consciously trying to remember every feeling that you have while you're still having it, right? But that's very important. So we take that moment to relax and focus 10. He says, now you will let your resonant energy balloon move inward. Let it reabsorb itself into yourself. So again, we allow our resonant energy balloon to be absorbed into us. It is our energy. We control it. It's our protective energy. It's where we have safety and we can trust it and believe in it and control it. Okay. And then, of course, he says, you will return now to physical waking reality, both physically and mentally. And you will do this by the method you have learned, by saying the number 1 in your mind. Again, number 1 is that trigger to wake up. And he says, return now to full physical waking consciousness. Do it now. So, folks, that was Wave 3 Freedom, Tape 3 Vectors in Focus 12. Very interesting. Again, we're learning how to navigate and move in this state, expanded state of awareness, where we're no longer just kind of stationary doing our work, where we are learning how to move around in this darkness. And it's amazing. And as we do, we are perceiving things. For me, it was simply just interacting with a friend. It'd be great to hear what your stories are. What are you perceiving when you listen to this tape. Wave 3, tape 3, vectors from Focus 12. Folks, this was another great episode. I appreciate you being here. And as always, remember, folks, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.